and it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham-Fars incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer really standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on podcastufo.com. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello, and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host. In just a minute, we have Alejandro Rojas coming up with the UFO updates. And our guest this evening is Sam Maranto. He's a repeat guest. He's been on a number of times. Used to actually help out with the show way back when. And you can actually listen to these old shows and archives if you support the show for only $2 or more a month. If you are supporting the show, thank you. If you cannot, then you can still listen to the whole show live every Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on podcastufo.com or on PSN Radio. And also, if that's not a good night for you, you can listen to the full show on the Dark Matter Digital Network, and that's Thursdays at 10 o'clock to midnight Eastern Standard Time. And Alejandro, how are you? You're back from the south, from Florida.
I am back from Florida.
Yeah, I want to hear how that went. Some of my UFO buddies were there. How was that?
It went great, yeah. It was a lot of fun. I thought the lineup was great. You just mentioned the PSN network. Angel Espino, who started that, lives in Florida, and he's someone I've been working with for years. And he says, I don't know if you've heard this, and I'm very flattered. He says it over and over again. He got inspired even to do podcasting because he was a fan of my show. But I remember back in the day hearing from him. So, but after all of these years of him listening to my UFO show, UFO Think Tank, and then Open Minds, this is the first time I've met him face to face. So that was really cool. But otherwise, great speakers. I mean, Erling Strand from Norway was excellent.
Yes.
That was really cool to hear him and his perspectives on that. And I was able to confirm, if you didn't make it to MUFON, we're going to bring him to the UFO Congress. So he says his schedule should be able to accommodate it, and he is very excited about it. So wait till you see some of the video and cool stuff they have from Norway there.
I can't believe it. Just for the listener that's not aware of this is a scientific study that's been going on for a long time. There's a little outbuilding, separate building with instruments, right?
Yeah, they have a building with a bunch of instruments that they measure this light phenomena that happens in this area called Hesdalen, and they have plenty of videos. In fact, you could go to YouTube and Google the Hesdalen lights, and you're going to find a lot of videos that have been captured. He is a professor, I think, at the University of Oslo, but I know lots of people out of that university have headed up a scientific investigation of these lights. They don't know what they are. And interesting enough, that they think they could be some sort of plasma ball. And Professor Strand does not agree with that. He thinks that they appear at times to be intelligently controlled, which is a very interesting thing. I was shocked by that.
Yes, I think I've heard someone else say that maybe it was him. Does he actually say that in one of the YouTube videos?
I'm not sure. But there is a documentary that actually won I think it won People's Choice or Best Full-Length Documentary at the UFO Congress just a few years ago on this case. A couple of people from Norway, they actually came out to the UFO Congress from Norway to accept their award and to show their documentary. But there is a great documentary out there, and they do have a version in English on the Hesdalen lights.
Yeah. That's another one of these areas. But to hear, someone like him who's been studying it think that they're intelligently controlled, that is pretty exciting. Because I know that, like, for instance, Brown Mountain, there's a lot of copper deposits in the ground there, around there, and a lot of people are suggesting that somehow that has to do with, some type of reaction, natural phenomena. And I was wondering about where the Hesselen lights are, if there's any type of deposits of any type of minerals or metals or anything like that. That's one of the questions I would ask.
People can look in the analysis, and that has been done. The geography of the area, the geology of the area has all been looked into as to part of the mystery. Although I think some people argue that the geology, although there are some things that are different out there that could be causing it, I don't know that anybody's seen that it's particularly, unique, that it has features that you can't find other places that don't have this phenomena happening.
That's pretty exciting. What about Ben, Moss, and Tony? I was very excited to hear they were talking mostly about the Socorro incident, weren't they?
Yeah, that was really interesting, especially for people. Well, it was interesting. I was going to say that was really interesting, especially for people who don't know about that case. But it is actually very interesting for people who do know about the case, such as myself also, because I got to learn about more witnesses. There were a lot more witnesses than I knew. I got to see the analysis on, some of the things that people thought it could be and why it was not. More pictures that I've ever seen of, Lonnie Zamora, the person who witnessed that UFO, and a great video with Ray
Stanford.
Oh. Yeah, Stanford.
Yep.
And it's talking about his research into this. He's the guy who's researched it the most, for many, many years. And so it was really cool to see him talking about it and to see pictures and a video of him and talking with Hynek as a very young man about the investigation. So some really cool stuff. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I would like to see that myself. I really would. And Ray is a dedicated listener to this show, so he's listening right now, I'm sure of it.
Great.
So, yeah. Little shout out to you, Ray.
The other talks, and they were all good. I don't think there was a bad talk at all. A lot of them were really fun, but I wanted to highlight some of the unique ones that we haven't heard before. And I had Bill Schroeder on my show recently. MUFON man, he goes by, a retired police officer who had an incredible sighting, and he hadn't spoken, at a UFO conference before, but he did great. He was really interesting. He had a phenomenal case, a sighting he had while he was in the military that he spoke about. And it was and he was just great. He's a very likable person. And it was just one of those great things to see someone with, the background he has talking about his investigations into the topic. But he was really good, too. But everybody was really good. I thought it was great. Some people have commented that there was a low turnout. I saw somebody online say something like that. I didn't notice that. I go to MUFON conferences every single year. I think I've only missed one, the one in Kentucky maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And they've all had similar turnouts. I think California, Irvine always does a little better. And otherwise, they're all about the same. And this one was not the least attended that I've seen. So it was, it had a good turnout. At the dinner, there was a big, the room was full. So it was really fun. And just the number of people is great. We were talking about Erling Strand. He's actually, what they've done out at the Hesselen Lights with all of these cameras and everything, that group UFO Data is trying to reproduce and put more units around, and Erling is part of that group. But it was interesting. They had at least kind of a couple socials or gatherings where people from UFO Data, Mark from who's got the UFO Tog project going on, and Bill Schroeder and Morgan Bell from Florida MUFON, they have their own night sky observation kind of project that they've been doing as well. So they all got together to kind of share what they were doing. The idea was them to hopefully network and share ideas and work together. I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't know that in these meetings we learn, at least I learned anything that I didn't know before, but that's kind of, that's not necessarily fair because I've interviewed all of these guys, whereas others haven't. Mm-hmm. But it was really cool that they actually all got to be together and discuss their projects. So that was another important thing that happened out there.
Yeah, I'm actually glad to hear that happen because I've actually been advocating that they talk. So it sounds like perhaps a first step, or maybe they have even gone beyond that. That's excellent.
Yeah, at least a first step. And then I also got to go to Epcot, where I got to participate in a mission to Mars.
Oh, really?
Yeah, things went a little haywire. We were on a rocket. There was some sort of telemetry that went wrong, so we kind of had to crash land on Mars. But Gary Sinise was our at the Capcom, guiding us through everything, and we made it.
You made it. Awesome. How is the Red Planet these days?
It looks good. Looks good. There's a base out there, and when we arrived and finally landed safely, the personnel at the base were really excited.
Did you happen to see Schwarzenegger?
Schwarzenegger was not there.
I just wanted to hear you imitate him. That's why I brought that up. Wow. That's good. Great. So what?
Get your ass to Mars.
So what else is going on? Anything happening for sightings or anything like that?
That's really the best news out there. No, there are some things going on. There is an interesting UFO video from August 19th, 2016 that we just posted yesterday from Portland, Oregon. Of course, this is another Roger Marsh story from the MUFON files. Mm-hmm. What's interesting about this is you do see some lights in the sky. It starts off with a couple lights in the sky. And they look to be kind of flickering, so you're thinking, well, maybe Chinese lanterns, maybe flares. But then another light comes on a little further away, flickers for a while, and then goes out, which is not indicative of a Chinese lantern. That's not so strange for a flare. However, there aren't any military bases in the area, it appears. So there still could be a prosaic answer to this sighting, but it is a little bit odd at first. So at least I haven't seen anybody really crack this case yet. But, that's an interesting one.
Wow. Yeah, a Chinese lantern cannot rise without being on the whole entire time. So for it to just come on, that is interesting. A flare could do that, but you'd see a streak when it was shot up. If someone shot it out of a flare gun or something. Yeah.
So
cool.
I don't know. There have been divers, with streaking lights on them.
That's right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what it might have been. It didn't look like that either because you see them kind of twisting and turning and things like that. So I'm not quite sure what it is yet, but it's pretty interesting.
So what else is happening?
Yeah, there are a couple of headlines too, and we post those on our front page. Also under articles, you can go see the daily UFO headlines. But just a couple bigger stories that are out there that we don't necessarily have stories from. But the biggest being SETI having gotten a signal recently that was a strong signal. And it seems like more of the media is saying it possibly could have been alien as opposed to SETI itself. In fact, Shostak posted a video on why he doesn't think it's aliens, but that's creating kind of a buzz out there too.
I bet. So this happened back in April, I think, 2015, if I recall. And the Russians and I'm trying to think who else were involved and kind of didn't really talk about it until recently. So I'm sure there's a little bit of buzz about that as well.
Yeah. So everybo's posting about that. It's really all over the place.
Yeah, if I remember right, it's 96 light years away, and they know that there is a planet, around that sun, but they're not. They think it's more like a Mercury-type planet or something like that. No Earth-like planet found.
But Shostak is obviously pretty. I think he's a little peeved that people are running with this, calling it an alien signal.
Yeah. Well, I think the reason, or part of the reason, is anytime someone keeps something quiet for a while and then it comes out, the conspiracy theorists kind of go after something like that.
And it's more fun to put in your headline aliens. You're going to get some more clicks if you put that in there.
Slightly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, you said there was a couple things. Anything else?
Let me see. There are other videos. I mean, interesting enough, there have been some videos lately. So, for instance, in Wycombe, most of these are kind of in the UK, actually. There was a blue flash that was in the sky. Otherwise, just the news has some other videos out there that luckily are not from Security 10 or what's this other one, Section 51, I think, or from, hoax videos. These are just people who have submitted videos to them. Yep. And some of them are a bit interesting, but there have been quite a few of those out lately as well, which is pretty cool.
And you can see everything on your website or link to it, so, most of them, right?
Yeah, exactly. All of these you can find at openminds.tv.
Excellent. So thanks so much, Alejandro.
Thank you, my friend.
All right. And glad to have you back safe and sound. And we'll be talking to you next week.
Excellent.
All right. Hang on, everyone. We have a quick music break, and we'll be right back with the one and only Sam Maranto. That clip is by Bruce Rainier, a fan of the show. He lives in Canada. Thank you, Bruce. Sam Maranto, welcome back to the show.
What a pleasure to be back, my friend. And it's nice hearing Alejandro's voice. And did we not have one heck of a great time at the conference? Oh, my gosh.
That was really a blast. It was so great hanging with you and Julie. We just had such a good time. And by the way, if you haven't heard Sam Maranto on the show before and you're new to us, Sam was on we were together for a little while helping out with the show. And I consider Sam one of my good friends and really a pleasure to always talk to you, Sam.
Well, it's the same goes this way here. But I tell you what, it was a perfect marriage as far as talents and abilities with you and Alejandro. And I want to thank you very much for starting out with you in those early days. We did have a good time. But I know where talents really seem to work together, and you guys just gel perfectly.
Gel, that's a good word.
Yes. Yeah.
So for the listener out there, again, who is new, who hasn't heard you before, I know a number of people, there's a few in the chat room that have heard you on a few times, but can you kind of go into who you are and I know you had a sighting, I think, when you were 9 years old or something. You're very young, I believe. But anyway, can you kind of go into all that stuff for the new listener?
Sure. My ufology found me. I didn't find it. I had my first experience in 1959 when I was a child, probably about, I'm 61 years old. My birthday's coming up on the 14th of September. So I was a young guy out there at my uncle's cottage exploring while he was working on his new cottage, and he had just dug a well that day. They were out there digging the well, and of course I had to find out how deep it was, so I'm dropping all sorts of stuff down there, and he goes and he says, "Get away from there, don't go drop anything down." So I go in the back, and there is a canal that connects to a lake. This would be in the Fox Lake area in McHenry, Fox Lake area up north in Illinois. So I'm out there and I'm pitching, skipping rocks across the canal over there, or channel, and all of a sudden there was this brilliant orb of light comes flying across my right shoulder, goes over a fence, and goes in back of a willow and shoots back up into the clouds. And it became very strange because my body was really hot at that point. It frightened the heck out of me, and I was very warm. And before I knew it, time lapsed extremely quick. My aunt was looking for me, and it was dark out. And she says, "Where were you? Where were you hiding? What were you doing back here? Why were you hiding from me?" I go, "I was here all this time." And apparently something transpired because it scared the bejesus out of me. I jumped into the car. We went back home. We got into the house. I crawled right in bed. And my mom goes and says, "Aren't you going to watch Leave It?" Well, it wasn't Leave It to Beaver. It was Dennis the Menace. And I always watched it. I go, "Nope, I don't want to watch it." So that was an experience that I had. And I had a few other experiences with entities soon thereafter. And that was something I didn't want to talk about for years. So that was the first thing. Then my dad had an interest in this subject. And he got interested in it one day by going to, he was a music teacher, so he went to the house and was teaching piano to this one boy and his father, who were amateur astronomers. Were outside. They're looking at some objects in the sky. He gets to the door, rings the doorbell. The wife goes and says, "Oh, hurry up, go outside. They're looking at some things in the sky." He goes back there, and they go, "Yeah, we just seen a bunch of UFOs." My dad goes, "What are UFOs?" And they go in the house, and they gave him a book. And before you know it, that book and the magazine are sitting on the table the next morning. And that was, little they know, they gave me the adventure of a lifetime. That's what really got me started. And I gave my first presentation on the subject of UFOs, I think, in 1966 or 67. And probably to every single class that I was in, into high school, I probably gave a presentation. So it was a subject that it just took me, heart and soul. I mean, it just grabbed me. And the scientific aspect is where I really am interested in heading, and of course, the mass sightings.
Right. Yeah, we're going to talk about that now. So what was it? I had a friend. When we were like, I don't know, early teens, and the subject came up one day, and we both thought it was really cool, and but I don't remember much else about that. So when you were going through school and you did your presentation, and a couple of times, were you ridiculed at all or teased? Any like classmates give you a hard time about that?
Well, I was so used to it because I was a nice little plump Italian boy. So I was used to be getting, teased or ridiculed and sarcasm and all sorts of stuff. It fell in line. And to me, it was just like water on a duck. It didn't matter. I had an interest. But then there was enough people in the group. Anytime he gave a presentation, to this day, it doesn't matter. I really enjoy a serious confrontation of a meeting in the minds when it comes to this matter. So I don't care about that, but there's enough people in a group, even as children, that warrant bringing this information out because they're just yearning for this information.
All right. Well, let me just play this at you basically, and that is all right. I just meet you. You got off the stage talking about UFOs, and I'm going to say to you, there's nothing to UFOs. What can you possibly prove?
Proof, the thing is, me and proof, that's one word I don't really like because science doesn't really ask for proof. Alcohol and math does. So, but I can tell you about evidence. And, we have Ted Phillips with some 3,000 plus cases of physical trace evidence. We have radar data and pretty much anything that science would use as far as any sort of sensorial type of instrumentation. We've established something is there. And that is the most important thing from a scientific perspective, is that science is best when it's out looking and weighing the evidence on phenomena, not cutting the same frog over and over again. We've done that. We know what the inside of certain things look like. Let's explore the phenomena that are out there. And this is what science is about.
Science is also, especially when it comes to astronomy, is observational for the most part. For just going along those lines, there's people totally convinced there's dark matter and dark energy out there, but there's no proof of that as well. But I think it's kind of interesting that there's so many people that just think it's the UFO phenomena is bogus, no matter what they hear, or no matter who has witnessed one.
True. How many times we hear? In fact, this morning, I don't know if you got my email. 2 questions came in that I thought they are brilliant questions.
Yeah, I'll pose those. Why don't we just go into that right now?
If you don't mind, please.
Yeah. Hang on. So, by the way, any listener to the show, you are welcome to send me an email at martin@podcastufo.com if you have any questions for the guests. And a lot of times, a question could be generic. So, if it's not geared to a guest, it can be just geared to any guest, and I'd be glad to ask. So here is one of the questions right here. As most of the population carries smartphone technology, and with the use of social media, if a mass sighting occurred in present day, do you think the government would still be able to use tactics to discredit any coverage of the incident? I'll ask that one in the second question later.
Well, the thing here is, as we know, how many times we keep hearing, well, you have these cell phones out there, and where is this evidence? Well, it doesn't matter how much evidence there is. The bottom line is, I can assure you, there is a program or programs in place to basically circumvent, obfuscate to some degree, or detract any value of it at any time. And this has been thought out to the 10th degree, and you could be rest assured of that. So it doesn't matter if they land on the White House lawn, because what it's going to be is probably the first thing is that they're going to say it's a beer commercial or some sort of terrorist act. And then before you know it, they're bombing some country that has a resource that we may need. Something will happen, and I can assure you this is the type of programs that they have in place. And they've thought this out for years. I'll give you a quick example. When Jim Mars was doing his research on the Aurora crash back in 1897, and by the way, that crash was the absolute end all of the great airship episode during that period of time, 1898, 97. That was the last period, the last time it was actually published, anything was published, of the 1,500 articles in newspapers around the United States. And I had asked him, I says, well, what was the most interesting thing that when you were doing this research, what was the most interesting thing that you discovered? He says, Sam, did you know that there were people there within a relatively short period of time telling people to go home, picking up the pieces of the craft and carrying it away? And I says, you mean to tell me that in a short period of time, people from outside the community were there, which obviously means a protocol was in place in 1897? He says, Sam, yes. And I go, well, who on earth could that be? And he goes, that's the question. who is orchestrating that. So, I mean, we have these events that go on, and some things that go outside the scope of. Right now, I'm doing some research for a presentation I'm going to give on Fatima, which was October 13th in 1917, which was a mass sighting of an unidentified aerial phenomena, of course, which got scooped up into the religious realm. And there may be some component to that, I don't know, but it depends on what your definition is. And from the new revelations that came forth in the last, say, 20 years, there's been a lot of information there that wasn't revealed. And I think we have tons and tons of accounts like this where people have scurried off evidence, have told the witnesses to shut up or nothing happened, or if they were very active, vocal, and known, basically tell them, be quiet or just shut them up some way or another.
Wow. So can you go into that case a little bit more? I'm just not familiar with it.
The Fatima case?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, it was for a period of 6 months. On the 13th of the month, every month, there was a appearance of this small being, approximately 3 feet tall, and this being appeared to be female. The drawings of which are actually archived and are now available, and there are 3 very good books. A number of researchers have been out there looking at this, and the funny thing is it was all in Portuguese up until, I believe it was about 2006 when it was translated. And the fact that that's one person I would recommend having on your show is the person who did the translation, and I'll get that information to you. Very interesting story. I have a background in theology because I went to a seminary, so I knew about the case. And of course, what was echoed is the religious correlation of this being the sighting of these children seeing the Blessed Virgin. And this happened in Portugal, and of course during the First World War. The background as far as the social environment was being torn apart by social unrest. There was the socialist and the fascist parties, each of them having their own directives. The women in the community were very strictly governed as far as what they can do and cannot do. It was very strict. They couldn't read. They couldn't go to school. And the social structure was very rigid and hard. And the German invasions into the colonies in Africa were taking place. So they were spending money overseas. The government was having problems. And, of course, with the rise of communism, we had that taking place. And, of course, the church was very concerned about losing volumes of course, their converts in the Eastern Europe, and with the advent of communism and atheism, there was major concern. So this happened at the right time to be scooped up and used, if not genuinely, at least it fell in to a good political position. Either way, what these children saw, mainly the big sighting, the mass sighting, took place on October the 13th of 2017. So next year it'll be 100 years. And there were approximately 60 to 70,000 people out there. At approximately 1:30, there was a beam of light beaming down from an object that appeared to be pearlescent, silver pearlescent, and within the scope of that very small beam, there was this image of this woman, or female type image, and the characteristics were a short skirt type thing, and some draped, something draped over the arms, and holding an orb in its hand. And nothing was actually spoken, but talked, basically a telepathic scenario. And during this time, There was buzzing in the head like insects. They were hearing insects like buzzing around them, which is commonplace to a lot of close encounter type scenarios with crafts. I had another case in Malibu that was very similar to that. And the thing is, there were people out there standing in the rain. You know, we're talking tens of thousands of people. And in an instance, this object comes down, which they thought was the sun, and is referred to as the miracle of the sun. In fact, this is a very huge thing for Portugal. It is probably one of the biggest tourist attractions, religious tourist attractions, and I sure would love to go there one of these days. And people had experienced miracles when this event took place. Within the scope of approximately 200 meters, they were miraculously healed from various diseases, etc. But this disc object came down and became translucent, and they were able to see three beings actually inside of it, and the object actually veered off over the crowd. There's a photo of it you could see on the internet, and
not a real photo of it, is there?
Oh yes,
yeah, there was an from 1917.
1917.
Ah,
yeah, the real photo, and when this took place, there was a tremendous amount of heat. There was discoloration of everybody in the crowd. It was very bizarre, on and on and on. And the clothes that they were wearing were soaked and immediately dried. The mud in that area turned to dried soil. I mean, it was just a strange, miraculous event that was very commonplace. There are approximately 15 correlations to encounters that we would have today or in the past, throughout history, that fall in line with these unidentified aerial phenomena. Call it whatever you want, be it from wherever they come from. It doesn't matter. This is pretty much the same type of phenomena.
Remind me why there were so many people that saw this?
Because it was 6 months. I think it started in March, I believe was the first month. March, I believe was the first month. And this apparition had told them there was 3 children, and Lucinda, Francesco, and the other cousin, and they were told that to come there each and every month on the 13th at approximately noon. Well, on the 13th of October was the big event where you had all these people, and they had heard about this. The funny thing was, this little apparition and these type of events had gone on in this area before and throughout history. It wasn't something unknown. It was known throughout certain pockets of the community, and especially the more rural areas. But this really took, it really caught on, and the people were showing up. There were cures, miraculous events. So, boy, it is just one heck of an interesting case. And, of course, it's a mass sighting of something unusual.
Now,
love that.
Did they have a movie about that? Not exactly like it?
Sure. It definitely was a movie. And that movie was all geared towards a religious perspective.
Yes, I saw that when I was a kid.
Yeah, back in the 50s. Remember, I think it was 1952 they came out with it.
Well, I saw it when I was, like sometime in the 60s or early 70s, something like that. Yes, and I remembered it was more about, like you said, the religious part of it, like Mary, I believe, was supposed to have shown up or something.
Correct.
Yeah.
And boy, those kids and the photographs, if you take a look at those photographs, look at the expressions on the 2 girls. The one little girl has her hand on the side, and they both have their eyes, they're looking, they were not happy. Because people were saying, "Oh, you're a liar, doing this." They were given the 3rd degree. They were interrogated. This was a serious event. This was taken very seriously. And because, it had various implications, especially the religious overtones and this big social divide in the community, and this riff. So it was a very significant event. And the other thing was there were messages given to the eldest of the group, and 3 messages, and that had religious overtones too, or could have been interpreted into religious overtones. The third of which was never revealed.
Huh. How about that?
Yep.
Wow. And is there a lot of documentation?
Tons.
And I think you said there were 1,500 articles. Is that what you?
Oh, that was the Great Airship sighting.
Oh, sorry, I confused the two.
Yeah.
So, but at the time, was this worldwide press?
Yes, it was documented throughout the world. It was it became very popular soon thereafter. The war was, of course, front and center. And but what had happened is I think it was 1978. They had a ban on secrecy and censorship. So what they were doing is opening the archives of on all past information. And the one individual who was a Portuguese researcher and historian was doing research on, of all things, women's rights, and within that time period, as far as getting a profile of what they went through during that time period, and went through this case because there were so many women involved. Of course, 2 of the 3 witnesses were 2 female girls, and one of the things portrayed, or this being portrayed to them, was that they were to get knowledge, and they were to read, and they were to learn, and that was against the principles of that time. For that community, they kept the women away from knowledge and treated them, like second-class citizens. So that's how she was able to actually get into this information, and everything else that came out of it was a revelation that she had no idea about, and so many people had no idea about, and many people actually within the religious orders didn't even know about all this information. It was there, but nobody went into it and read the details.
Wow. So, by the way, if you're listening live and you want to pose a question for our guest this evening, Sam Maranto, all you have to do is go to the chat room, and that's on podcastufo.com. It's also on PSN Radio has one as well if you're listening over there. And I will pick up a message on either chat. Also, you are welcome to call in. Anyone is welcome to call in during the show. And that number is 603-967-4030. If you miss that number, it's right on our website, podcastufo.com. During the show, you'll see it. So, Sam, you're into mass sightings. I'm going to ask you this other question here in just a minute, but you're into mass sightings. And the obvious of why mass sightings are so important is the fact that there are so many witnesses. What are some other, besides the multiple witnesses, what do you think is so important about mass sightings? Because I know you like to focus on those.
Well, the thing, and you had mentioned before, observation in science, the number one sensorial or sensory component to science is observation. First and last, always. It's very important. Observation is key. And yet, and this is what I find to be so hysterical, astronomers base the volumes of what they do, especially in the past, purely almost on observation. And observation is key for them, but yet for our scope of research, it's nonsense. Mm-hmm. And understandably, within reason, that I could see where they could scoff at certain things, but the bottom line is observation is key. And when you have a large section represented, in a fashion that isn't planned. It's just a spontaneous scenario of people with a cross section of the demographic of your community, giving the same or relatively similar interpretations as far as what they saw. And that's really all you want when you're investigating. What did you see? Give me detail. I don't want you to tell me what you think it is, where it came from, its implications, anything other than give me the details. Give me the size, colors, shapes, distance, motion, those things that are relative to the very first components of an observation, to let us know, first of all, it was there. It wasn't imaginary. Now, when you have multiple witnesses, you have credence. Now, you have things like Tinley Park, Phoenix, where you have video footage, photographic footage, and in some instances, even physical trace evidence. Here you have this unidentified aerial phenomena take place over 30-some thousand people. In 1917, where we only had bi-wing airplanes, nothing more sophisticated than that. It wasn't a drone. It wasn't this, that, or the other. It wasn't a celestial event. We know that. And there's a photograph. And they experienced it. And there was physical trace evidence. It had all the markings of everything necessary to really make a solid case. Now, unfortunately, not every case works out that way. Let's take, for instance, the Val Johnson case with the police officer in 1979 driving along the road up and his car gets hit. Well, Val had no other witnesses than himself, and the other witness to it would only be relative to physical trace evidence. That was it. And, of course, the condition that he was in when the other police officer responded to him. But other than that, he had the physical trace evidence speaking for him. So when the evidence speaks, physical trace evidence in a scenario like that could say a lot, especially when it's been tested as much as his case.
Right. And that car is still intact the way it was in 79, right?
Yes. In fact, one of my investigators just came back. In fact, he's the chief investigator for the Michigan State, and he's our triage director here in Illinois, and Dan Snow. He went up there and took pictures of it, and he went to the very site that Val was at and took and analyzed the site, took a bunch of photographs, and he's very good at analyzing that. Now, I had the privilege of actually meeting and interviewing Val back in 2005, and I have his interview on tape. I don't know if anybody has any on tapes, since the original first couple of years. He kind of went low key and didn't want to be bothered by this anymore. But here's a case that it would have been all that much more better if he had at least another couple of witnesses or another witness to at least say, no, this man isn't making this up. This light came at him. It hit the car, and what he thinks may very well, some of this energy actually went through the car. As you remember, the windshield was displaced, both split out and in. And even though it is reproducible in a laboratory, you can reproduce it, you cannot do it simultaneously. So there's volumes of scientific data there. But yet the value of another observation is really key. It would have been It would have solved so much of the dilemma this man went through. The allegations by Phil Klass that this was some sort of prank. In other words, getting back to the observation, to have another body to add credence, especially an independent one, is great. If you have multiple, that's that much better. Then if you have a mass sighting, and to me 100 people or more, my God. And here you had multiple communities coming out, 30,000, 60,000 people. Wow. Tinley Park, the Tinley Park sighting. We had thousands of witnesses. I mean, it wasn't a small event. So I think this is the value, observation.
Right.
It all starts there. Now, you can take a picture, and people show me pictures. Well, look, I'm going through these photos, and look what I see. Well, that doesn't mean anything. It's interpretive. Nobody there's seen whatever is there. We don't know what that is. It could be a dust particle or whatever. So,
right.
Well,
kind of
observation.
a little back to the last question that the gentleman posed to you. Most people do have, at least in the States and parts of Europe and different areas in the world, most people do have a smartphone with a camera and a video player in their pocket. And the argument you often hear, like when I had, the last time I had Seth Shostak on, or the first time I should say, he mentioned that. He said, everyone has video cameras. Why don't we have a good video of a UFO? And I just wanted to hear what you...
well, and funny thing about it is the really good stuff is faked. It's CGI. Yeah. And CGI, with the advent of CGI, that just created all that much more dilemmas when it comes to analyzing video. In fact, there's some people say, oh, I won't even look at a video because it's probably CGI. There are certain attributes to the genuine phenomena that will display itself in video, in any sort of digital format, that is almost telltale something unusual. And, we hear this, fuzzy photos don't have any value. Well, each and every day, fuzzy photos save lives, and they're called X-rays. And there is attributes, when it comes to that energy, those energy fields, how they affect photons and how they affect the camera renderings. So the thing is, there are other components there. And unfortunately, we are so trained to look at real high, really clean images. And the more exotic it is, the more titillating. That is what we are drawn to. That's because we have such short attention spans.
We sure do.
And, I can recall a sighting back on, it was June 20th, 2004, right before all this stuff happened in Tinley Park. It was down in Wilmington, Illinois. 3 kids were standing out and seeing a disc over a field rotating. In fact, the rotation of it, they said it looked like a quarter on edge. And if you were to hit it and watch it spin, exactly like that. And it was over some tree line. They were watching it, and the eldest brother comes along. He had gone to the store to pick up some Pepsi. The 4 of them were out there watching this thing for a few minutes, and instead of observing it till it finally left, they went back to playing video games. Now, you'd say, well, that's the way children are. No, that's the way most people are. Now, mind you, the Tinley Park sightings, these objects were sitting out there for some length of time, and yet when you look, the average observation is approximately 15 minutes. That's because people get bored, and they go back to doing whatever they're doing. That's the average, but not everybody. I remember one gentleman in 2003 saw this huge triangular craft fly over while he went to the porch. They were cleaning the basement. He's standing there looking at it, his jaw dropping, saying, what on earth who would need something that huge? And he's watching this thing traverse across the sky. And his wife calls him and says, hey, get down here. We got to clean the basement. And you know what he does? He leaves, go down there, cleans the basement. He says, I could have kicked myself in the butt for that. But this is what people do. We are so regimented, so trained and conditioned that we forfeit the good common sense to just make the observation. Sit there, observe it. And when you're observing, try to get as much detail as possible. Don't think outlandish things of where it came from, or just get the detail. Watch the characteristics. Get as much detail it could give as far as distance, height, whatever, because this stuff is crucial. And that's really what all that matters when it comes to a case, is compile the data.
Yeah. Going back to the Fatima sighting. Anybody can, maybe I'll try to put something up in the show notes, but if anyone wanted to see the pictures of that, all you have to do is Google 1917 Fatima. It's spelled just the way it sounds, Fatima, sighting or apparition or the sun. What did you call it?
Miracle of the Sun.
Miracle of the Sun. Yeah, and you'll see the pictures there. And so I understand in a way what you're talking about. It does baffle me, though. We had someone recently on the show that basically said her mother went to sleep when everyone else was watching this UFO. So I do get that everyone's attention span, especially today, is so short. And it kind of leads me into this question. You sort of answered it already. This is also from the same email. And do you think that people are getting blasé to the potential genuine video evidence as there's so much CGI fake videos out there? And, you know, we sort of answered that already, but I also do want to say that how much of a big deal would most people think it would be if there was a mass sighting? And do you think it would just kind of vanish away in the media like it generally does?
Yes. I'm just thinking what they did here in Tinley Park. I mean, think of Tinley Park or think of the O'Hare sighting was a mass sighting. And they lived in the media for X period of time, and sometimes they get celebrated, you know, like, for instance, the Tinley Park case was celebrated last year by some cheesy stuff, you know, some fluff in the media. But nothing beyond that serious. You know, nothing of a serious tone or say, no, this really did happen. And, you know, they always throw in the extraterrestrial hypotheses and they have to make fun of that and anything else. You know, it doesn't matter. The bottom line is they're always going to try to shuffle it away. And strangely enough, that ridicule factor, that we always have that giggle factor. Even on, we get cases, you know, 90-some% of the cases we get in are just explainable just by reading it and cross-reference it, celestial objects, misidentifications, etc. But every once in a while, when you get something a little more elaborate, the first thing that comes to mind, they're crazy. Maybe they're not. Get the information. But the added feature of video today is so important. Get a picture. Get a picture. The other thing is multiple pictures. Heck, it's a phone. Call somebody. Get somebody out on the porch or wherever they're at. Get another perspective. We could do triangulations. With triangulation, we could tell the size and everything else. We have the technology there. Yeah. We have it there. And that can't be dismissed. It's science. So,
right. I also think that I've talked to you before about the sighting I had and how the thought of taking a picture never even crossed my mind. And I didn't actually. That was in 2006. It wasn't like a smartphone. I think I had a flip phone and would have taken a terrible picture. But still, I think a lot of times when someone has a sighting, I know that right now I'd grab my camera if I saw something, but I don't know if it was the first time I saw something, if I would even think of that, because you're in the moment and you're mesmerized and it's tough. But there are enough people that think to take a picture out there that the reason there's so much going on that's pictured is because people now know how to. All they have to do is look on the internet, and they can see the different sites to report. And so, always interesting. So, you mentioned just a second ago about the O'Hare incident. Did you have, I know you're in that area, you're not too far away from O'Hare, probably an hour drive maybe, something like that?
Right, about an hour.
Yeah. Now, did you have any interest when that was going on? Did you have any investigative work that you did on that yourself?
Yes, I worked under. Well, what happened is first of all, like the origin of cases, like where the case, like it was a Newfork case that came in. Peter Davenport had the case. They were called into him. And Peter Davenport, that was also the same scenario with the Tinley Park case. It did not come to MUFON at the CMS. It went to Peter Davenport, even though it was right in my backyard. It's amazing. But then they contacted, we got contacted here. I was contacted and went to work on it. The O'Hare case, I didn't find out about it until Mark Rodiger called me up. And Mark and I are talking because the very day that it happened, I'm on the phone with Dave Marler, and who was the state director at the time, and he was in the process of handing it over to me, and we were going to get together on the weekend. So we were making the arrangements and just basically talking, and Peter Davenport gave him a call, and he goes, I got to get off the phone right away. It's Peter, And sure enough, that was what was going on, and he was explaining to him that there is this case going on, and that Richard Haynes, Dr. Haynes, is going to be the point man on that at NICAP, National Aviation Reporting Center, NARCAP, for aerial phenomena. So he was the point man on it, and there were different people with different disciplines assigned different tasks, and he did a great job putting it together. I was out there. I had a couple people that I interviewed. One person called JH, and if you get a chance to look at the 120-some page technical report at narcap.org, you could see it. I think it's number 10, and you could actually read through it or download the details. And my interview was with this J.H., who was she was a retired teacher, and she came from the East Coast. She had a background as being a reporter. She was a military brat, and her father was a commander of a helicopter air wing in the Navy, knew all the technical terms. She had seen pretty much everything that flew. Her and her friend, who was I believe she was a doctor from Belgium, they were going to the international concourse to pick up a friend who was a pilot coming in from overseas. So on the way down on Mannheim, they seen the object below the ceiling of clouds, which is about, I think it was 6,000 feet of, the ceiling was about 6,000 feet. By the way, we're coming up on the 10-year anniversary, November the 6th.
November 7th.
November 7th, yeah. It was 2006. It was about 4:20 or so in the afternoon.
Right.
And so they're watching this thing. They said it was clearly visible. This thing was there, sitting there. And so they got off, getting to the concourse. There are other people out there. They didn't have to point anything out. They were watching them. And they were videoing them. People were taking photographs. And that's why we were so surprised that we really didn't get our share of video or photographs out of that sighting. The other thing is getting our hands on the security camera footage. So either way, all this stuff, people say, well, that wasn't even photographed. Oh, no, it actually was photographed. The pilot who was at the C-17 gate, C-17, they were going to be pushed back pretty soon. And, one of the, I believe it was the co-pilot had a camera, took some pictures. So there were pictures taken. A few were submitted to Mark Allen over at Above Top Secret. And that's actually how I got the witness, as I'd called him because I read something on the blog, and also noted that she said there were photographs taken, and that a photograph was submitted to Above Top Secret that seemed to be legit. So I looked at it, and the thing is, if we don't have a chain of custody, we don't know who had it, can't examine the camera, etc. Basically, all it is an illustration at that point, but it's a very good illustration. And that is specifically what she said she saw from that concourse looking up, and she said that object was there for some period of time. Then, at a very steep angle, or a very slight angle, had shot up straight through the cloud, nearly straight up, leaving a gaping hole to the blue sky above.
Right.
And if you get a chance to actually look at that, the technical report from the site, and Dr. Haynes did a great job, and everybody else putting it together, you could actually see what it would take to displace that much vapor in an instance. And now that's all science there, and it's very impressive. And though it doesn't state, by analyzing that it's something from out of this world, it would be, by our understanding of conventional technology, a pretty difficult task for anything conventional to do.
Right. Now, okay, one of the things I have mentioned on this show in the past, and I'll just run it by you to get your thoughts on it. So there was something like a dozen or so United Airlines employees that watched this thing steadily for the 5 or so minutes before it shot up. And they were told not to say anything. Now, one of the things I think about is the airline business in general. I'm not talking about pilots have it pretty tough because they have to watch what they say. But there are like flight attendants and other crew, ground crew, stuff like that. And nobody stays at that job. There's a lot of in and out, a lot of open and closed doors in that field. So people will leave their job. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are, why nobody has come forward, past employee of United at the time, why nobody has come forward yet, a witness, and actually talked about it directly.
Well, we had 14 or so witnesses come forward and talk to, John Hilkovich, because it was in the Tribune.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about the same number spoke to Dr. Haynes. I've interviewed 4 people since that, since the original event. That first witness, the last time I spoke to her, I think was February 26th or 24th. And I don't even know if she's alive. She was very ill at that time and gone through some surgery. But Linda Moulton Howell also spoke to her. But we did speak to a few other people that were at the Gate C-17, and pretty much the same thing. The only difference is I was getting a better idea from 2 other individuals as to the size, and it was large. It could have been 60 feet or so in diameter. It wasn't all that small. It could have been larger than initially what we may have thought. It could have been larger. So I mean, the thing is, as time progresses, and of course this was the largest. UAL was just getting out of bankruptcy at that time in February, and it was the largest bankruptcy at that time of an airline. Mm-hmm. So of course I think they encouraged people to shut their yaps because they didn't want to be known, take on a new marketing scheme as being the airlines that really caters to some out of this world customers or service. So I think that was maybe smart or very cautious on their side. And if it wasn't for John Hilkovich, the story I think would never have broke. He, of course, called up there and said, was there anything to this? And of course they said no. And then he said, well, I'll just request a FOIA. And then all of a sudden I got a call back, and yes, there were safety concerns, and yes, people did come forward because it was a safety issue. It's Class B airspace. Nothing should be flying around out there without a transponder, So
that's right. Yeah,
there were concerns, and things did change. The patterns did change a little bit. There was some backup, but this, the bottom line is none of this wants to come forward. They want to brush this under the rug, and for good reason. People get concerned about it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because that is one of the only case that I can think of where it was right in the airspace, right over a gate. I can't think of any other case. There's a purported case where, of course, one landed at an Air Force base. But this one, just with the witnesses, it's just to me, it's one of the top sightings. I know it didn't last very long, but just the the witnesses and the description and how they all matched. And I think I had someone on the show a while back where they said that they had a witness come forward that was actually flying in, and he kept his ticket just so he could prove that he saw this thing from the air. And indeed, the flight pattern was right and everything. So you never know. Someone could come forward. They were told not to talk about it while they were at United, and someone could come forward and speak publicly about it. I think that would be really good if that happens someday.
Well, I find it interesting that, in, what was it, 2008, January of 2008 or February, we had it was February, I believe, February or March. It was still snowing. In fact, we had a blizzard that day. We had an event, Rodiger, myself, and Ted Phillips. We had him calling in on the line, a few other folks. We had a presentation at it was at Harper College up there. They have a big center. It's beautiful. And one of the people who showed up in this miserable blizzard was a 90-year-old nurse who had just loved the subject. And I gave the presentation talking about the sighting, the case. And she came up to me afterwards and she goes, Sam, I've dealt with so many pilots because this is what I did. And do you know why they don't want to talk? Do you realize the grueling paperwork and interrogations they have to go through and medical experience? They have to be analyzed psychologically. It goes, this is why. It's just intimidating. The other thing is it stays on your record. You don't want it on your record.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a game changer. It could destroy your credibility, your reputation, your career.
That's right. I have a friend that I hadn't spoken to in a number of years that is a pilot, and he is, I believe, somewhere stationed basically overseas, working for some foreign airline. An interesting guy, and we would have conversations back and forth. I used to know him when he was in the area. We lived near each other, and we hung out a few times. A fun guy. So I emailed him, and we had this email exchange going back and forth. And then I said, hey, by the way, can you tell me if you or any of your friend pilots ever had a UFO sighting? I've never heard from him again. That was it.
Wow.
Yeah. So I guess he doesn't want to talk about it.
It's taboo, for some people, especially if they had their own experiences. One of our very own investigators came on board, and he was a air traffic controller in Puerto Rico. And they saw a object, large disc, come out of the water and into the sky and hover and just take off. And that just blew them away. And he really didn't want to go into all that much detail publicly ever about this. And but I guess his manager, the chief or whoever was in charge, said that this was not all that uncommon, and they were seeing, but they don't report it, and it's just boom. So, one of our guys here, he has a background in radar. He was on the Kitty Hawk during the Vietnam War, and he just loves any UFO and aviation type cases. And he found a whole bunch of very unusual cases that took place during that time with the shoot-down orders into the 50s here in Illinois. He had some very interesting cases.
Yeah.
And have you ever had Frank Frascino on the show?
Oh yes, he does the monster. What am I thinking of? He's someone that has written a book, and talks about the something woods, Flatwoods monster.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's where his mother's, I think it's his mother's side of the family is up there. And Frank is just one really interesting guy and detailed. Oh, my gosh.
I found him, he was a character.
Oh, he's a blast. The guy's something else. We had him out here twice. We just enjoyed him. And his mom, she was, talking to her. She was, it was a lot of fun. Wonderful people. And just down to earth, but knows how to do research. He had tons of data. And that whole shoot-down order during that period of time, I'm wondering if it still stands. I don't think so, but I'm curious to find out, if it is or isn't. I don't know.
Now, up on the message board, a good point was talking about airline pilots, captains, or whatever. Look what happened to the Japanese crew, the Japanese pilot, Teriyuchi, whatever his...
Teriyuchi, 1628, Japan Airlines, yeah.
That, I would love to have someone on to talk about that. So that sighting to me is one of the best ones. And I'm trying to remember the FAA guy that does talk about...
Jack Callahan.
Yeah, Callahan, right. That whole case is so fascinating. It's one of the, we talked about O'Hare. I consider that a major incident. And look what did happen to him. He had to take a desk job.
Oh, sure.
Hang on, Sam. We have an incoming call. Let's see who wants to talk to us. Hello. This is, are you there? You there?
Hello.
Hi there. How you doing? You're on the air. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
It's Doc from England again. How are you, Martin?
Hey, from England. Doc, how are you? You're on with Sam Maranto. You have a question for him?
Well, it's not so much. It's more of an observation. Couple of things. I actually had a sighting right near an airport, and there was a group of us. We all saw it. Not one of us took out our camera. We just stood there and stared at it. And it was just, everyone was like looking at each other and like, did you just see what I saw across the flight path of an aircraft? And we were all the same, but none of us took out cameras out. The second thing that I'd like to say is, as you know, I'm a professional videographer, and the first thing that would happen to me if I filmed something with my equipment is it would be fake, because I'm a professional.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the more credibility and the more experience you have, it seems that it diminishes in the eyes of the public. That's very interesting. And you know what else, Martin?
What?
Your point there about not, you just don't want to take your eyes off it. I am guilty. I will swear I am guilty. I had a sighting, both Julie and I, of an orange orb in Orland Park, I think it was the 3rd, it was a Friday at 9:40 in 2003. And that orb sat there in a 23-mile-an-hour wind, static in the sky. And do you know, I couldn't even blink. I didn't have any sort of camera, but I couldn't even blink. So, my friend, I am as guilty as the rest of us. So, yes, my eyes were watering so bad, I couldn't blink. I swear, I kept them open for 7 minutes because that's almost exactly how long we observed it. It sat there perfectly still, static in the sky, as orangish, reddish orange, the setting sun. Nothing in the sky looks like that. And there was just these discharges looking like fireworks shooting off all around it.
Wow.
And then there was some oozing, which was another type of discharge on the bottom. And then it took off in a south by southwesterly direction. And it as it was going, it transformed its color range, which was really interesting as far as some idea of telling what sort of energy may be involved here. And we watched it for approximately 7 minutes, and I swear I didn't blink. My eyes had to soak them after that.
Hey, Doc, over in England, what time you got over there right now?
It's 2:19 in the morning.
I thought so. Now, you yourself do some type of filming or you're planning on doing some type of filming or something.
Yeah, well, I've got two cameras. One is a Sony Alpha 7S, the other is an XF200. Most of my work is corporate-based, so I basically stand at the back at conferences being really bored. But quite often, but the cameras are designed really for, they can do like being almost zero light shooting. One of them was the Sony was bought because I work on short films, and at night time it's fantastic. You get really clean images with it, and that was the idea. But I live in the centre of a town, and the light pollution is just dreadful. So what I want to try and do is produce something so people can see how the principles of night filming works with professional equipment. And that was the plan. Originally, I bought the Alpha 7S to do sky watching, but it's because of where I live. I just cannot get anywhere without getting all the light pollution. As soon as you open up the camera to the light, you start to get that orange glow of street lights just flooding in. So it's quite difficult where I am. But yeah, that's what I do. Yeah.
Wow, great. You have anything else for our guests this evening?
No, that's fine. Thanks. I just thought I'd let you know and tell you what will happen. But I will leave you with one thing. One of the people I was working with that day who had the sighting, he'd actually been, he was a student coming from India. He'd been in the country for a day. It was his second day in the country, and he said to me, "Did you see the magic light as well?" Anyway, I'll let you get on. Thanks for your time.
All right. Hey, thanks for the call, Doc. All right.
Okay. Bye.
Oops, I just cut him off a little short. So, Sam, you wanted to, there was something you mentioned that you wanted to talk about earlier, and I'm trying to remember what it was when we were speaking.
CSLs.
Yeah.
Chinese sky lanterns. You know, Venus was the nemesis for years.
Yeah.
And Phil Glass, I think, wore that out too. In fact, he, the late great
Phil Glass. You there? Sam, are you there? Sam, your internet. I know you had trouble with it before. Let's see if we can get you back here. All right, hang on, everyone. We're trying Sam. His internet went out. Don't fret, though, because I have a backup number. If I can't get through to him, we'll just give it a try here for a second. For all I know, Sam could be still talking and have no idea that he's not online. Are you there, Sam? You there, Sam?
Yes, I'm back.
Okay. I was just saying you could be talking constantly and have no idea you were offline.
Yes, I was like, what was that? Okay. But Phil Glass said that was Venus, was what the officers down in Southern Illinois were saying. And I guess that was what Nancy Carpenter was also videotaping, because now we have a videotape that was taken that evening. So I guess Venus was up in the air doing all sorts of interesting things. But, the so-called skeptics could say anything because people are so anxious to get their hands on some sort of prosaic explanation so they could, despotically, say, aha, told you, see? There are no such things as UFOs.
Yeah.
And therefore, I could go back to my comfort of ignorance and dispel that.
I think we can also shoot ourselves in the foot, too, when there is a prosaic answer for something and there's a denial factor with some people. So I can kind of understand, but I do think, I can understand part of when someone, just wants to just discount something without really looking into it. I do think, though, if someone is open-minded and they're interested in the subject, then they will take more of a look. But if they're open-minded and not interested in the subject, they may just still discount it as very possible.
All it takes is objectivity, and that's all you have to have. Back to the whole issue of dichotomy, you have the skeptic and you have the believer. You have the person that is every unusual story, and unless we have evidence, all it is a story. It has to have something more in back of it to substantiate it. And again, going back to the various types, you have a scenario with very good physical trace evidence, phenomenal trace evidence like the Val Johnson case, but you don't have another witness, especially an independent witness, to corroborate the scenario that yes, this did hit him. Somebody without any sort of interest whatsoever. Then you have a mass sighting like Tinley Park, but you don't have physical evidence per se on the volume of like the Val Johnson case, but you have a multiplicity of other things. You have a radio transmission interferences. You have photographs. You have video. You have, at least 1,000 witnesses, over 100, so it's a mass sighting. Then you have a case like Fatima, of a UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena. Even though it gets scooped up into a religious concept, the bottom line is it's still a UAP, and it has pretty much everything, but nobody has anything more than this one picture.
Right. Yeah.
So you have this whole range of different things, and then you get, now mind you, you're working with these things, and then you have the person that calls you up or leaves a report on a CMS stating that, I have this feeling that I've been abducted because, my pen was moved. I found it in the wrong place, or some stupid thing. Or I saw this light in the sky, and it's there again tonight in the same spot, and I'm getting strange thoughts in my head. You know what I'm saying?
That is Venus.
It is Venus, right.
Yeah.
And Phil would have a field day with that.
Yeah.
So the bottom line is I mean, I don't want to cater to anyone's notion of what it is. I just want to follow the evidence and let it speak for itself.
Right. And I'm trying to think of who the new Phil Glass is.
Well,
there's Michael Shermer. There's a lot of people involved in the Skeptics movement, so to speak, and it's really pretty solid in the college.
Big time
genre.
Big time. In fact, I had the opportunity to speak before one group out in Illinois, and a Skeptics group, and I love it.
Mm-hmm.
And I have no problem with that. But you have like folks like Neil Tyson
Yeah.
DeGrasse, and he basically is the
I forgot about him, but you're right.
Yeah, he's the spokesman. Science, in that real orthodoxy of it has to be this way type of scenario, that the figurehead of science has changed throughout time, and there always has to be a figurehead. Carl Sagan was really the first honest to goodness celebrity after Einstein, but in the realm of who's going to be the next figurehead, who's going to be the spokesman for science, It was him. It was Carl Sagan. And with the demise, after he passed and everything, I think they were running about to find somebody comparable. And I think Seth really filled the shoes for the longest period of time. I think Michio Kaku was there for a while until they realized you couldn't put the reins on him and he wasn't going to be their boy. He's very serious about his research, and it may cross swords with the orthodoxies. And now Neil is that person who would be front and center to be the spokesman for that very strict, be it orthodoxy or skeptic or pseudo-skeptic, whatever. And then you have, of course, Michael Shermer, who has Skeptic magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the old guard. You have, in fact, we ran into him, and I spent a lot of time with Robert Schaefer, and I enjoy Robert. And I even had a chance to meet James McGahey. We really enjoyed him. He's a very good astronomer, and though I don't agree with him when it comes to some of these views, but in their own right, as far as their disciplines, they're brilliant men. And then, of course, Joe Nichols, who is a good investigator and does a lot of great work too. But in the same tone, I would agree with them on some of their interpretations of all these cases. Some of them, yes, of course.
Yes. They can... Oh, wait. Someone has a question up here on, let's see. Do you happen to know anything about the 3 Canadian guys that were out hunting and the crazy scope sighting? I think he's talking about the one where the guy climbed up in the tree and was there all night. I'm not really sure. Are you familiar with that one?
Doesn't come to mind.
Yeah, no problem. It's just a question on the message board. Neil deGrasse Tyson, I have heard him talk about UFOs before, totally discounting them like they're, ridiculous. And the thing that always crosses my mind is there must be for someone like him, they must have some little bit of curiosity about it.
Oh, I'm sure. But I think the fact that he is very instrumental and works as a consultant with NASA, so he's read into a lot of things. I think he has to maintain a certain posture.
Sure.
And, the thing is, in maintaining posture in a public view, when you're doing investigative work, when you're doing things, with different titles or whatever, you have to maintain a certain posture. Now, I could get as off on a beaten path, talking about some of the most bizarre things when it comes to this subject matter, because it is bizarre. And I've had enough experience with it to state that, yes, these things do take place, and they are bizarre. Is there a correlation with them? Say, for instance, the tie-in to, say, for instance, something along the line of something like telepathy, which, of course, would be, everybody would say, no, there can't be any correlation. And apparently there is something there, or there may be something there. But time and time again, we hear about that. And so that sounds a little too far-fetched for the first person on a level 1 coming in to first take a peek at the subject. You don't want to drive them away. Our concern, or our concern should be, is getting more people at least to put their toe in, into the water and test it first, to take a look at the subject matter and don't scare them away with all the truly bizarre aspects to it, but let them basically understand, first of all and foremost, that the phenomena is genuine and is probably the most important subject on a larger scope than anything they could ever get into. And the subject matter has more about us than it is about whatever it is playing around or visiting.
Right. Someone put up on the message board, James Oberg, also as a debunker. And if he's the one I think he is, he looks like an angry guy. Do you know who he is?
Oh, that's James McGahee. But James Oberg he actually does work with NASA, and he's a consultant for he's a consultant for NBC.
Right.
When I worked with Dateline, we did the 10 best. The 10 best. It's actually supposed to be the 10 best photographed, but they ended up with the 10 best encounters as far as UFOs.
Oh, yes.
And he was one of the individuals that was on the other side.
That's right.
And so was Robert Schaefer and, of course, Michael Shermer. In fact, Michael Shermer said they showed him saying the statement that was my first statement when I sat down and was on camera, which was any 3 points of light automatically makes a triangle. So your eyes can play tricks on you. That's something you have to pay attention to all the time. And he mentioned that, but they didn't have me making that statement. What they wanted me to do, they were waiting for me to say the E word. And I wasn't. I don't, as you know, that's something that doesn't come out of my mouth very often. And I sat there, I swear, for about 2 hours before I put it into a very well-constructed compound sentence. And they edited it so they could only get it may very well be something extraterrestrial or something along that line. But they chopped that up so bad. And but that's that's basically how it goes. And I talked to the producer. I says, well, why are they coming on board? They go, it has to be balanced. So I talked to Rodinger. Well, what do they mean by balance? He goes, oh, Sam, that means they're going to chop it up. They're going to take they're going to forfeit some of the material and, give them rain. And
now,
that's what
we started to talk about the Chinese lanterns and never went anywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I think along with the Chinese lanterns, we also have drones, the things that are against the ufology today.
Drones are probably the biggest one now. The Chinese lanterns, we have formulas and we train people to, I could look at footage and just by analyzing the footage, get the weather data and pretty much discount it,
Yes. There is a video that someone sent me on YouTube, and it's clearly Chinese lanterns, and the people seeing them are just freaking out. Like, they just, like screaming and like that it's a UFO. So I saw, I've personally have seen Chinese lanterns during 4th of July a few years ago, and I understand why people mistake them because they're quite amazing.
Oh, yeah.
When you see them floating up, and just
they're gorgeous, and you could see them at a distance. People were saying, the Tinley Park lights were flares. In fact, Michael Sherman thought it was illuminations of flares, on balloons, but he didn't understand the weather, didn't review the footage, didn't understand things were perfectly static, hovering, didn't break the geometric pattern, only the perspective of the observer, the camera, and would be the alteration of the design. Then, the fact that this was being seen not just here, but around the world and recorded around the world. We had footage from here, British Columbia. There was a sighting in the Aegean Sea. And then we had footage from Melbourne the next day, all within the scope of our investigation, which was 72 hours.
Wow.
And, all this stuff was analyzed by multiple groups independently. And now what we're going to be doing is placing this into a documentary. It's just purely the scientific laying it out from a three-dimensional type evaluation. And I think it's going to be great. It's going to take some time, but it's going to be great. It's going to be one heck of a production.
When do you think that'll actually be available to the public?
Probably 2 years.
Yeah.
So I would say 2 years, 18 months, 24 months.
I just recently had a text back and forth with James Fox, just because Carrie Lloyd Whitehouse, who does music for our show, offered to do the music for 701, what James Fox is coming out with. So I texted him and said, hey, do you have music? And he said, check back in a year and a half. So, okay. So these things do take a ton of time to do. And, of course, I'm also in touch with Randy Nickerson for the Ariel School documentary that he's been making. That's been going on for 7 years.
He is a perfectionist.
Yes.
And does phenomenal work.
His photography is amazing.
Oh, gosh. I was just watching him taking multiple takes on just one segment or a sequence that he was going to put together. I go, this guy's a perfectionist. I like his work.
Yeah, that'll be a good deal.
In fact, James Fox. James is very good, too. In fact, I presented it to him to work with me years ago. I think it was before his father passed away, and I haven't talked to him in ages. It's been ages.
Yep. I expect it. Out of the Blue is one of my very favorite UFO movies. People ask me what my favorite, and so there you go. That's one of my very favorites.
When's 701 supposed to be wrapped up? When are they saying that's going
Well,
to be?
he basically said check back for a year and a half for the music, so I'm guessing it's probably going to be a couple of years at least. And you have to have funding to move ahead with any type of when you're getting into films. I know we're getting way off topic here, but you have to have tons of funding because you're, just a little bit of background that I know about, film. Your editing alone can cost you a small fortune, a large fortune.
Monster money. And just getting the use of the studios, getting the people in there to do it. Right now I'm just in getting the information together, lining up the people. That's going to take a year.
Yeah.
Actual shooting, and then that's the fun part.
Yes.
Laying everything out, getting it's a pain in the neck.
Yeah.
But I remember when we were working with I was working with UFO hunters out here and running around, running with the doing logistics with the logistics director and pulling permits and doing all this stuff and making sure we have this site to use, getting hangars, airplane hangars. We were supposed to go to, I forgot where they originally had. And I go, no, you'll never get in there. And I had to change that around last minute and run out here, run out there. And then weather is always a factor. We had a storm when we were doing that to Invasion, Illinois on Tinley Park when we were doing the experiment. And we went out, way out southwest from here. And we had tornadoes come through. 3 tornadoes were just a few miles away. Boy, these guys from California never seen anything like this. And wow, it was frightening. So,
yeah, there's a lot. Never think of that part. So we did talk about Tinley Park a couple times, but for the new listener that is not familiar with that case, can you actually talk about it a little bit?
Oh, sure. The first mass sighting date was August the 21st, which was the Air and Water Show, Chicago Air and Water Show. And I believe there was 3 million people downtown that day. And it was a perfect evening. Or I should say near perfect because I didn't get a chance to actually go out and enjoy it. And people were having these barbecues, a lot of block parties going on. And then, of course, in Tinley Park at that time, they had the Midwest Center, which I think was the Tweeter Center at that time, which is a big outdoor concert center. And Ozzy Osbourne was playing.
That's right.
We had so much activity in and about the area. And these illuminations showed up around 10 o'clock and sat there over the community and traversed over that community. But they were, in British Columbia earlier. They were in the Aegean. They were seen out that way. They were seen in New York. And it just sat there in the sky. And the funny thing is, air traffic out here, we have, 32 airports and small airports, heliports, and medevac. I think it's 32 in this area. So besides, we're going to talk, everybody thinks of the big airports, but Illinois and the Northwest Indiana area has quite a bit of stuff as far as when it comes to airports and medevac and heliports. Anyways, no air traffic while these illuminations were sitting there in the sky. Zero, none.
Huh.
And that lasted for well over an hour and a half, nearly 2 hours. And then after they cleared the area, normal activity took place. Very unusual.
That is really strange. And has anyone ever tried to figure out exactly why?
Well, that first night, I didn't request a FOIA on the radar data. But, of course, they came back again of all nights on Halloween night. And Halloween night was the far more unusual one, because we had multiple types of UAPs up there, multiple types, UFOs, whatever. And we had the orange orb being seen on the east side of the city, the town, Orland Hills, Orland Park. One gentleman had it over his house, and he says, Sam, it was as big as my house. It was huge. And he thought that is what everybody else was saying, and it wasn't. The triangular object was further east at that very same time, over by his near the Oak Park Avenue and further east, and traversing northeast to southeast. And then there were 3 other objects seen earlier: a horseshoe-shaped object with a boom and a round sphere on top of it. A gentleman seen that. It was directly over his head. He got out of his truck, and that was a very interesting report. And those objects are actually seen with the massive triangles, and it's actually covered in Dave Marler's book on the large triangles, and he has these other objects that are associated with the large isosceles and other types of triangular craft, these massive ones. So we had it was like a used car lot up there of unidentified objects going on that day, and it was chaos. The poor police department, they were getting calls left and right. People were stopping in the middle of the street. I mean, it was nuts.
I bet. Wow.
But that night was the night that TJ was filming, and I think you've seen the footage where I've got it on tape.
Yeah. Yes.
Where he's got the airplane, the jet airliners flying, and he thought it cut between them. The object was I don't even know how many miles, 2.5 miles, 3 miles away from him, from where this plane actually was. And he didn't know that, but we knew it because we had multiple sets of footage all simultaneously being shot, showing that was the case. So, boy, it was just one interesting scenario of a mass sighting, probably one of the best with video footage. And it's a sleeper. I really haven't gone crazy as far as going with the publicity on it, but when you look at, you remember that big green, the United States map of locations of the best sightings, the most amount of sightings, and Illinois was right there, and the reason why was the Tinley Park case. And that wasn't the only mass sighting we had during the early part of 2000. We had the Rockford sighting, which was pretty much the same vehicles, and then the Southern Illinois case, which came on the heels of that case. That was January 4th and 5th, and the ones up in Rockford, that mass sighting took place on Christmas Eve New Year's Eve into 2 years afterwards. They had sightings up there, and they do correlate with the Carteret sightings in July of 2000, and I believe it was 2001. So, I mean, these objects were seen in and about the area around that period of time throughout the country.
Wow. Now, what about, just to switch gears a little bit, because I know generally the location where you're at, I have spent a lot of time out in the Chicago area. What about the Great Lakes as far as sightings go?
Oh, boy. I remember talking to one guy, and this gentleman called me up because he was watching UFO Hunters, and they had Invasion, Illinois. They had the Tinley Park case. He calls me up. He goes, "That you on television?" I go, "Yes." He goes, "Tell you what, those aren't 3 objects. It's one huge object, and I've seen it. I've seen it up here in Wisconsin, up by Rib Mountain." And he was telling about all of his experiences that he had seen. He says one time he was on Lake Michigan, and he had a house relatively close to the lake, and so he was on the shore, and he says this huge UFO came right out of the water, and then another one off in the distance came up, 2 of them, and they took off. And that wasn't the first time or the last time that he had seen them come out of the water. UFO sightings in and about the lakes, Michigan Grand Haven had some phenomenal sightings out there. And in the 1990s, it was phenomenal. I mean, this was some of the great sightings. And, of course, we had the 1966 sightings up there in Dexter and Ann Arbor that really changed the course of ufology. Those sightings, those were mass sightings. And
I'm not familiar with those. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. That was the swamp gas sighting.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
And,
the one where J. Allen Hynek said that it was swamp gas.
Yep, he came in from Arizona. In fact, I think Jack Valet met him up here too. But they came in, and he was told to basically bury this under the rug. He had gotten a call, and they said, hey, let's get this buried. Let's do something with it. And he comes up with the term, it was swamp gas. And in later, I remember one interview, he said that, and it was that time, it was at that moment that I realized that this will be the last time I will pull a chestnut out of the fire for the Air Force. That's
right.
A quote.
Yeah, I've heard that quote before.
Yes.
Yeah.
And very interesting, man. Michigan had a tremendous amount of sightings. They still do. The chief investigator there is the head of our triage. In fact, he'll be doing the presentation with me on the Val Johnson case on September 17th at our state meeting. And, we try to, I like to try to get along with everybody and get everybody involved in doing a project. It's fun that way.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy, Dan Snow is just like one of the greatest people you can meet. And hard worker, diligent, scientific investigator. He's been, he was Field Investigator of the Year, I think 2 years ago for MUFON. Just one great guy. And I'm so happy, so proud to have him on our team, I'll tell you. So are the rest of the folks. But, yeah, we have some great sightings. And it's not just the Great Lakes. Some of the smaller lakes we've had, I remember initially when I came on board, the assistant state director was talking about sightings down in southern Illinois. I don't know if it was Lake Carlisle, one of those lakes, smaller lakes, but relatively large, that objects were seen coming in and out of the lakes. So we have that USO-type phenomena here in the Great Lake region and some of the smaller lakes.
Wow. So we've got only about 6 or so minutes left, and I wanted you to. You said you have this presentation coming up. What else do you have coming up? Are you involved? You already said in this this film, and that. What else are you involved in coming up?
Oh, just a few local speaking engagements. Nothing major at the moment, and that's rare. I haven't worked on any major projects in almost 2 years right now, so I've been laying low. But I'm going to get back into speaking and doing speaking presentations. I have one that's sitting on the fence. I don't know if I'm going to talk about it for any speaking engagements. If I do, I'm just going to have to wear armor because it is one of those situations that, it could just cost me my life. I don't know. Yeah, it's one of those. It would be an event changer. One of those. What would change the course of things? Well, this may very well do it, and I don't know if I want to do it. But if I don't, there's still enough other cases. Tinley Park, we're going to wrap that up. We have some other cases. And the book that I'm writing, and I think I've told you the title of it before, Social Response, and it's going to be mass sightings and the potential of an extraterrestrial hypothesis as far as that goes. Mm-hmm. But it's going to be a few other people involved in that, and it's going to be pretty interesting. It's going to be more of a social psychology type book. But hopefully I'll have that done before the movie or the documentary.
I can see that is interesting. The sociological aspect of any type of group situation totally changes.
Oh God, yes.
Then
the social response, the way the entire community reacts to it. I mean, down from just individual to. I think of the Rockford case. Police officers were told not to even look at this object. On and on, weird things. I know out here we have a problem with the, I don't know what you would call it, radical Christian. fundamentalists,
Uh-huh.
where they actually protest. I get protests. I've had protests at events. I've had
Really?
Oh gosh, the things that have happened.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So that's kind of strange, and I'm like, why?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Okay, so can someone actually reach out to you if, say, someone's listening and they're in Illinois, and first of all, they would contact. You're the director of MUFON in
Illinois.
Yeah. So how does would someone be able to reach you easily?
They could email me at mufonsam1@gmail.com.
Okay, MUFON1. I'm sorry, MUFONSam1 at gmail.com. Yeah. So and don't. So there's someone else out there named MUFON Sam because you had to do the number 1, huh?
Well, I had it. I had Comcast, and when I moved, they end up. Oh, don't worry, it'll be fine. And well, I lost so much information. I had to grab a Gmail account, so it's gmail.com.
Yeah, that's right. All right. Well, hey, thanks so much, Sam. It's been a real pleasure speaking to you. As always, again, I consider you a good friend, and
same here.
And really enjoy seeing you. Was really enjoying hanging out with you out in Phoenix. Hope we can do that again someday.
Yeah, I hope you get back out here to Chicago and we could see each other too.
Yeah, I had a situation where I was going out there 2 or 3 times a year at least, and up to 4 or 5 times. And that whole I was working an event out there for doing actually antique appraisal work at a big event that happened, and that's not happening anymore. So, but you never know. I have a lot of friends out there anyway, so be good to see you sometime.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
You take care.
All right, you too. All right. So that's it for our guest this evening. And I want to thank a few people. First of all, of course, our guest, Sam Maranto, Alejandro Rojas, for joining us for the news at the beginning. I also want to thank Peggy Shunning for managing the Facebook page. People that do the music, we have Bruce Rainier and Carrie Lloyd Whitehouse. Want to thank them as well. Next week's guest has not been confirmed, so it's going to be a surprise guest. But I do tell people, if you want to see who the guest is, all you have to generally do is check the website, podcastufo.com. On Sunday, I usually have the guest posted at that time. So all you have to do is go to podcastufo.com on Sunday. And again, you can email me with questions for the guests at martin@podcastufo.com. Thanks a lot, everyone. And if you're listening this far, you're either supporting the show or listening to it free live. So I appreciate it, and we'll see you next week. Remember to keep your eyes to the sky.